everyone, good evening, and welcome to our third ever Game for Thought live stream series. My name is Allie Weiss, and I am a community manager here at Howest Hogeschool's campus for digital arts and entertainment. So if you've joined us for our previous Game for Thought streams, the one in November about sex and violence, and the one in December about discrimination and representation in games, we're super happy to have you back for this stream here tonight. And if you're new to the Game for Thought series, if you're just scrolling through Twitch and decided to pop by, we're super happy to have you here. So just a quick overview of what the Game for Thought series is all about. So obviously in the game sector, in an industry that is so technical, sometimes it's easier than we like to think to lose sight of these more socially, ethically relevant topics. So we thought it would be a good idea to just have a space where we could talk about these issues. And so we pick a different topic every month. And this month's topic is games and addiction. So once again, we are very happy to have you here. So we'll go over as well the schedule for tonight and our panel participants. So we will start out with a presentation from Matthias de Wilde. Matthias helps young adults with excessive gaming behaviors, and he also promotes a healthy online-offline balance, and he'll be sure to discuss more of that in his presentation. And so after a 20-minute presentation by Matthias, we will move into the panel discussion, which will be the bulk of our conversation here tonight. The panel discussion will take part in two different sections. So for the first bit, we will be covering pre-submitted questions from all of you out there. And for the last about 30 minutes or so, we will cover questions that were submitted in the Twitch chat. So you are welcome to submit your very own questions during the entire stream. Just make sure you go ahead and you put a Q before your question, so we know to go ahead and send that to the moderator. So in case you're wondering who exactly is on the panel tonight, I am very happy to read off our awesome list of participants for the evening. So on our panel tonight will be David Verbruchen. And so David represents the Belgian Entertainment Association and also the Flemish Games Association. Also joining David will be Roseanne de Kock from KU Leuven. She is the project supervisor of the Gameable project. Lien de Kort will also be joining us tonight, and she is the president of the Responsible Gaming Commission under the jurisdiction of the National Lottery, and she also represents the Belgian Association for Research. We have two students on our panel tonight. One of them actually was a panelist on our first ever Game for Thought stream. So Joao de Seger, he is a second-year game graphics production student here at Digital Arts and Entertainment. Joao, we're happy to have you back. And we also have a student, Arna van Kershaver. He is a third-year game development student. And the entire discussion will be moderated by Christophe de Bont, who is a freelance journalist for some clients that include De Standaard, the Flemish Games Association, and the Flanders District of Creativity. So again, we really encourage you to submit your questions in the chat. You are free to do so for the entirety of the stream. Just make sure you go ahead and put a Q before your question. Also, this is a space where we sometimes discuss some controversial, sensitive topics. So we just ask that you keep it respectful in the chat. You just keep it mature and have these conversations with collective growth in mind. And it's really important that we do challenge each other's views because I think in those moments we learn the most, but just make sure to do so respectfully. So again, thank you so much for joining our third Game for Thought stream about games and addiction. And without further ado, I will pass it over to our guest speaker for the night, Matthias de Wilde. Matthias?
Yes.
Matthias, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, I think we're started. It's my awesome. Great to be here. It's my first time on Twitch, so I'm a bit in between excited and stressed, but I'm sure it'll be great. I'm going to be talking about games and addiction, something I have a lot of experience with because I used to struggle with a game addiction as well myself. And there's a few things I want to share with you tonight. The first is, of course, my story. I'm going to share a bit about that. Then I'm going to talk about games and addiction. What is it? Why do some people get addicted? Are the types of people that are very prone to getting addicted to gaming? Then I'm going to give some advice, some tips from my experience with my own life, but also with a lot of the people I work with who struggle with game addiction, how to overcome it. And then at some point, at the end, I'm also going to be talking about how to prevent game addiction as well. So my story. I used to get into touch with gaming. It was about 20 years ago, a little bit longer even, when I was about 10 to 12 years old. I'm 5 now. I got my first Sega Mega Drive. That was before PlayStation existed, Xbox existed. I found it very cool. And one of the first games I played was FIFA. Now, of course, it looks a little bit different than now than how it used to. But that is the game that I basically was was my introduction to gaming. Of course, after a while, I started playing other games. I really enjoyed FIFA, but I started doing other things. I started playing like on a Game Boy. I loved playing like simulator games, strategy games, Command and Conquer, SimCity, Roller Coaster Tycoon, all these kinds of things. And at some point, when I got a little bit older, I started discovering games like Counter-Strike. That was also at that point, internet started becoming more and more mainstream. There were internet cafes where I used to go to and then play with some classmates, Counter-Strike, Team Fortress Classic also. And it was fairly innocent, but that's the point when it started getting a little bit more out of hand. I spent more and more time at home playing these games, and I had a little bit of a difficulty, getting out, going out, going to bars, going to parties where a lot of my classmates went to and friends. For me, it was very stressful environments. Try to avoid it as much as possible, and I just prefer to stay at home playing games. And then at some point, I went to study in Mechelen. I studied something like programming, and at that point, a game came out called World of Warcraft. I started playing it, and I started being entirely absolved into it. At some point, I was playing it much more than I was studying even. It was I loved it so much. Everything else had to go on the side so I could spend more and more times playing World of Warcraft. But at some point, it became an absolute addiction because I didn't do anything else anymore. I just did the bare minimum for my studies. I started studying like just when the exams came up, and then usually getting more exams during the summer time. So I spent more and more time gaming. At some point, it was even after my studies, I spent 9 months at home just playing World of Warcraft day and night, and that was pretty much my life. I had a lot of social anxiety. I had a hard time coming outside, talking to people, looking for a job, all these kinds of things. I very uncomfortable, and I just stayed at home playing games all night and all day. Now, at some point that changed. That was when I almost accidentally got a phone call from a company, and they offered the job, and they for me to come by and to see if maybe a job would be a thing with them. It was in sales, which was, of course, for me was very awkward because you had to talk to people in sales. But at that point, I thought, why not? I'll give it a shot. And at the beginning, it was very difficult because of course, I still had all the anxiety. And I was probably the worst salesperson ever because I still remember my first client. The client came and I just ran away. So I didn't sell a lot. It was cell phone contracts at the time that I was selling, Mobistar. And so anyway, but I stayed. I got a lot of tips from my colleagues. They really helped me a lot. And after a while, I started discovering and I started seeing like how I can improve. And up until that point, I was very passionate about gaming and about becoming the best in the games. I'm very competitive, but nothing outside of that. And now I had like the same drive and the same, desire to be better in my work in sales. And I started reading books, really listening to colleagues, trying out different techniques. And at some point, after a few months, I became one of the top salespeople, first in my company. First in my team. And then at some point, one of the best salespeople in Belgium. So this was like a total shift from one extreme almost to the other extreme. It was very strange to experience it. My parents didn't know what was happening to me, but I enjoyed it a lot. And that really brought me into personal development. I started thinking about how else in my life can I take on things. I started reading books a lot about business and marketing and life skills and all these things. And one of the things I spent a lot of time developing the past 10, 15 years was my social skills, because for me, that was still very awkward at talking in front of a group of people. I was very scared of all those things. And so I started following workshops. I started, public speaking workshops, doing theater also, dance classes, everything just to get outside, to meet people, to make friends. Because up until that point, I had very little offline friends. I had a lot of friends in Warcraft spread all out over Europe, but not so many people to actually meet with and talk with nearby. And so for me, my 30th birthday party was like it was so nice to have all these people, all these friends that I made in the past couple of years, and to have this big birthday party, because all my birthdays before that were pretty much just me, all on my own. Maybe my family that came by, or maybe one or two was pretty much it. And so it was a huge shift from 10 years ago when I was totally addicted to games. And that's also when I started, after doing a couple sales jobs a few years ago, I started Game Changers, because I felt like maybe some others are struggling with game addiction. And that's when I started doing lectures in schools. I've talked in about 130 schools, given my lecture almost 200, 300, 400 times. Sometimes I give multiple in the same school in a row, to about 25,000 children, where I inspire children to find balance between the on and the offline world. I started giving workshops also together with my colleague who I started Game Changer with. And right now, of course, because the lectures and the workshops are not so common, but even before that, I did and still do a lot of coaching. So I work with a lot of gamers who are struggling with game addiction, and also or just problematic gaming, and mostly parents who contact us who are struggling with their children, usually 12, 13, 14 to 20, 25 years old, where gaming is getting out of hand. So that's a bit my story. Now, what is game addiction? Maybe you may be wondering this. There's a lot of thoughts about this. A few years ago, the American Psychiatric Association, the World Health Organization, they started to recognize gaming addiction as an actual mental disorder. It's called Internet Gaming Disorder. They made this test with 9 questions, and it would be a bit too broad to discuss all right here, but there's like a few that really stand out on deciding, like, is gaming really an addiction or not? And one of them is, for example, tolerance. What does that mean? Is do you need like more and more gaming to feel the same amount of satisfaction as you used to when you started gaming? Because it's like drinking. The first time you drink alcohol, maybe for someone who is struggling with alcohol addiction or used to struggle with alcohol addiction, after a while, just drinking 1 or 2 or 3 glasses isn't enough anymore. After a while, they need 10, 20, maybe even more to feel that same amount. And is the same happening with games? That could be something to ask yourself. Escapism. Are you using games to escape negative feelings, negative thoughts? Is it like a coping mechanism that you use? And are you continuing to game despite having real life problems? So, for example, maybe your studies are not going so well. Maybe your friendships, your offline friendships are not doing too well, or you're having a lot of discussions with your family, with your parents, and it's a bit difficult. And you feel like gaming is not having a positive impact on it. Are you still continuing to game despite knowing that it may be causing problems? So these are like a few of the elements to consider thinking about gaming addiction. But even then, you need to have it like for almost a year before you can get an official diagnosis of a game addiction. But in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. Call it game addiction, call it problematic, call it whatever you want. For me, the real question is gaming having a negative impact on your life? That's really what the question is about. And if that is the case, well, then it is time to do something about it. Even before it's having a negative impact on your life, preferably. But gaming is not meant to ruin your life. It's something to have fun with. It's something to enjoy with friends. Something to do every now and then. But it's not something to get into trouble with. Hopefully, like I did. So how many people are actually addicted? So these are numbers I have from Belgium, because of course I work a lot in Belgium, but I assume they're in most Western countries very similar. So for teenagers, 12 to 18, about 11% is problematic. And for about 3% of the people, it is even an addiction, which is actually quite a lot. If you think 3% of children, and actually for adults, it's also around 2%. But if you take teenagers, that's about 60,000 people. That's almost as much as, well, that's pretty much as much as my hometown of Sint-Niklaas. So that's actually a lot of people. That's a lot. And of course, it's not so visible because, a lot of these people are at home. You don't see them. It stays inside. So it's not very a visible issue. So why do some people get addicted? This is an excerpt from the book that I wrote, a book which is coming out next month. I'm sorry, it's in Dutch, I know. But basically, there's a few factors to take into account. And the first thing is games. Some games are more addictive than others. It depends a lot on what kind of elements are built into the games. Are they online? Can you play with others? And usually the most successfully designed games are also the most addictive. Because the most sold, the most used, the most played games. You could say they are a success when it comes to game design, but maybe they're a little bit too much of a success because for some others, it becomes very hard to stop. So some games are more addictive than others. Some people are more prone to get addicted than others. Some people can easily just play a little game or play some matches, play some games, and just put it on the side. For others, it becomes very hard to put on the side. So some people are more prone to getting addicted. I'll explain who in the next part. And then the surroundings. Some surroundings, maybe you're getting bullied at school. Maybe you're just not feeling very well yourself. Maybe some health issues, maybe some family issues, parents are divorcing or something else. There's a lot of things that can be going on in your life. Maybe you're struggling in school, that can have an extra element to cause to help cause a game addiction. So these three elements are quite important. And who is more susceptible to addiction? There's a few things I want to share here. First, what I see, I pretty much when people come to me who are struggling with gaming, I always see almost the exact same profile of people that are struggling. Sometimes there are a little bit differences, but mostly they're very similar. So usually there are people who are more introverted than extroverted. And why is this? It's because, gaming, in a way, it gives a very comfortable way to be social online. It's a lot easier to manage, and it's a lot more comfortable than face-to-face conversation. Face-to-face is very hard. Some people also just like to spend lots and lots of time on their own, and this makes gaming a lot more attractive to them, and sometimes also problematic gaming. Secondly, they're also more thinkers than feelers. That means, what do I mean with that? Is they spend a lot of time in their head, thinking about things, thinking about the future, thinking about abstract thoughts and ideas. And they have a lot more difficulty just living in the moment, being in the moment, just enjoying the sun, enjoying the grass, enjoying. They're constantly in their mind. It's like their ideas are racing at 200 miles an hour. And what do games? So why are games so attractive for these people? It's because games are based on logic. It's like chess. In chess, it's very black and white. Well, it is literally black and white, but the rules are very easy. And it's very logical. It's very analytical. There is very little room for vagueness, and it's much easier to grasp and to understand for many of these people than real life, and especially social interactions, which is much harder to understand and to get. And then the last part here is that they are usually fairly intelligent. Some people are even gifted that I coach. And one of the reasons that these games are very attractive to these people is because they offer endless challenges, especially when you can play against, there's always someone you can play against in the whole world that is your level, maybe a little bit better than you. So there's always this feeling of challenge. There's always these, maybe if you playing single player. These are all these NPCs or bosses that you can play against. And something that is quite common is, so next to the besides gifted people, is autism is very, very frequent. So people with autism are very likely to be attracted to gaming. And HDHD is also something that I see quite often. And of course, it's not just gaming, because if these guys are not gaming, they're watching Netflix, they're watching Twitch, YouTube, maybe Reddit, 9gag, Discord, all these things. Probably often switching from one thing to the other, and then gaming, and then back, and switching, and so forth. So it's basically just a very, very big attraction to screens in general. So what can you do about this? This is, of course, a good question. First of all, if you feel like maybe it's a bit of an issue for you, the first step is to accept that it's an issue. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I mean, of course, it's not maybe the best situation to be in, but it's not the end of the world. There are things you can do, and I'm going to give some tips also. But the first thing is to accept it. It's accept that gaming is having a negative impact on your life, maybe screen usage in average, in general. And also, one of the things to accept is that the urge is stronger than yourself. And one of the things I usually see with like younger gamers who are struggling is like, no, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to fix it. It's going to be okay. I can control it. And every time they say they're going to do it and they're going to control it, but they still have these games next to them, and here they have school. The urge is just too big. It's too big. They can't control it, just like I used to. It's just very difficult to say no to gaming because it's so attractive to these people. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something to accept. It's very important to accept that. And then the second step is to set boundaries. It's very hard, like I said, to have, to take time to do schoolwork or to do things with the family if these attractive, maybe addictive technologies are next to you. So try and search or try to create screen and internet-free zones and times. For example, one of the challenges can be on the toilet, not to take your phone with you during dinner, especially at night. Also, not to have to try to. I know it's very tempting usually for gamers to be on quite a lot of the hours at night, but try and limit those moments and those times. What also usually helps is to have separate devices and locations. So, for example, maybe you can have one room, maybe your bedroom, for example, for gaming, and then another room, maybe the living room or the office or something else for. So if you have one room for the gaming, then you can have the other room for schoolwork, for example. So try and have different locations, different devices for work and entertainment. Another thing that helps is to avoid certain types of entertainment. So, for example, one of the things I've done is I try to avoid as much as possible online games. I still game from then to then sometimes, but I try to avoid the competitive online games because usually it gets a bit out of hand with me when I do that because I'm just very competitive. And when I'm playing, I want to win. I want to be the best. And also one of the things I haven't done in a long time now is watch series on Netflix. I notice whenever I want to watch one, whenever I start watching one, I have to watch the whole series, all the seasons of that series. So I just don't start watching series, for example. Sometimes maybe some movies, but that's it. So just know what is like difficult for you, and then make a decision. Like, I'm not going to use that application anymore. I'm not going to use that, that thing that is very difficult to control. What also helps is to create some accountability partners, maybe like people to study, to work together. And it's okay to be bored. Now, I think this is such a difficult thing for many of these guys, including myself, is to just accept being bored, to not being online, doing things, playing games, watching movies, watching videos, watching all these things. So creating some space outside of gaming. And then the next step, the third step, is to fill the void and create some balance in life. So take steps forward in different areas of your life, because it's one thing to put a limit on the gaming and screens, but if nothing else comes into place, then it's going to be very tempting to go back to screens after a while as well. So other things need to come into place, and try to find some kind of balance between school and work and social life, health, and things. Finding new hobbies, new passions. Many of the guys I coach are usually very prone to, how should I say, obsessions is maybe not the nicest word, but it's basically what it is. You could also say hyper focus or something like that. But usually they go from one obsession to the other. In my life, it's always been the similar. I all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I need to work on I'm going to work on my health, and then I go to the gym for 2 months straight, like a madman, and then I crash. It's too much. So finding balance has been a challenge for me and many of the people I coach. But it helps to find new hobbies, new passions besides gaming that may be easier to control. And of course, to build friendships, to build relationships outside of gaming. It can be so tempting to just have some online friends. But after a while, the danger is just like with me when I was 18, 19 years old, I started dropping out all my other, not managing all my other friendships, and one after the other, they started disappearing. So stay on that, and also be open to receiving support. Very important. And then the last thing is to become a hero in real life. This is the final step. Is it the most fun step? Sometimes one of the more challenging steps. But what do I mean with that? And that's what I see. Like when I coach people, it's very very nice. At like the end of the thing, like at the end, they actually become like leaders for their friends. They're like, hey, let's go do something, and hey, you wanna let's go running, or let's go, whatever. And I know, of course, now it's a bit more difficult with Corona and stuff like that, but these are the guys that are actually being proactive. They, instead of their parents always having to tell them to wake up and to go do something and to clean the dishes, they start doing it from. How cool is that? Instead of waiting for deadlines from your teachers to get into action and doing stuff, they start working on things weeks before it has to be done. So this is often one of the big challenges. But once it starts to work like this, your life can really start working for you. It's a huge difference. So being proactive, start taking, action in your life, reaching out to others, helping out, being an example can really help as well. Becoming the best version of yourself, and ultimately, making a game out of life. Just like for me, when I had this focus in the past of being the best in World of Warcraft, started switching it to work, and it gave me a lot of more satisfaction and structure and social things in my life, and in the and now it's in my job, in my work with Game Changers, to try and make that the best possible. So there's a few things. I'm going to check the time. Okay, there's a few things I'm going to quickly say about how to prevent game addiction. And the first thing is, there's a few roles here. There's a few roles that that can help with preventing game addiction. And the first is, of course, the industry. A lot of game development industries, game designers do great work to create incredible games. And then, of course, we, the gamers or consumers, start using them. And that's where things get interesting, because, of course, these game design companies, they're not idiots. They have teams of programmers, hundreds, thousands of programmers and marketeers and behavioral psychologists who are reading books like Irresistible and Hooked and other stuff to think like, how can we get people to play more our games than that of the competition? And so they implement all these tactics and technologies and all these little techniques into their games to keep people hooked, you could say, in a way. And that's where things start getting out of hand, because then all of a sudden, these kids, they start getting aggressive. Parents are starting to worry, like, oh, no, what is my son doing? He won't come to eat anymore. Or he comes very too late, or they come to eat and then they disappear to their room again after that. They can't get them off the games anymore. They start spending lots and lots of money on skins, and some gamers also start getting into trouble with school. And that's usually the point where both parents and gamers are like, help, this is getting totally out of hand. And then these consumers, they're like, government, what are you doing about this? What are you doing? And the government's like, oh no, the people are unhappy, we have to do something. And so then, of course, this is pretty much, this is with gaming, this is for pretty much any industry. That's when the government steps in, and then they're like, oh, we need to do something. You know what? We're going to stop this loot box things. Apparently, it's very dangerous. Maybe in the future, who knows? We're going to put some games for 18 plus. For example, in China, there's actually a limit for minors They can only play, I think, 90 minutes a day during the week and 180 minutes during the weekend. And they can't play during nighttime, so there's like a curfew for gaming. So, this may seem a bit strange, but I fear that that's when it comes back to the industry. So if the industry keeps making these games in a way that people start getting into trouble, what's going to and game addiction becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, chances are that the government will have to take more and more measures, and limits will just have to increase, and it will be a lot more difficult. Or just game design companies will have to take a lot more into account. So there's a few pointers I want to give, and then we're gonna close. So what can then we're gonna go to the panel. So what can the government do? First of all, I think it's important to create awareness. So for example, lectures, information, brochures, anything to get more the word out to people that game addiction is real, it exists, people can get addicted, like myself. I did, and it's something to be aware of. Luckily, it's like still only 3% that get addicted, maybe more now during the corona. I don't know, probably it's a bit higher, but there are no numbers yet. But it is real. And another thing I think the government can do is to protect minors from addictive processes. There's like gambling mechanisms, maybe. Is it really necessary to have like unlimited online spending available? Like, I sometimes have children 13, 14, 15, 16 years old who are like spending hundreds, maybe thousands of euros from the parents' credit card on games like Fortnite, or League of Legends, or other things, maybe Roblox, Minecraft as well. And unlimited online access, I think it's important that the government starts to step in and do things about that. And also to help provide accessible therapy programs, workshops, coaching, therapy, whatever, for people who are struggling with it, preferably before they are in an addiction, so we can avoid it. Secondly, what can consumers do is, so first of all, educate yourself. What is video game addiction? Also, like, I started reading a lot of books about what is the internet doing to my brain, like how, because I there have been times that I struggle with gaming, even during that phase in my life where I was working a lot on myself. Sometimes I would relapse, and I'm like, what is going on here? Why is it so hard for me to not watch YouTube and not watch all these sites, play games and do all these things? And so I started researching a lot about, what are these behavioral mechanisms that trigger this behavior in myself. So educate yourself, read books like, for example, The Shallows, a good book about technology in our brain. Game in moderation, and very important, help others that are struggling as well. And please don't accept abusive game design. I think in the past there have been like some outrages when it comes to companies implementing some abusive game design. I'm going to share that in the next slide also, some examples, but it's good that we hold companies accountable to make games that are fun and interactive, but not addictive, preferably. So what can the game industry do? That's the last part. Is I think, and this is like more like an open-ended question. I think we're probably going to be discussing this also. One of the things we're going to be discussing in the panel after this is, when does game design go too far? There's a few things I think that come to mind. In my case, is like one of the games I used to play, World of Warcraft. It has like a very low. There are items that people chase for years, because there's like an endless grind, endless goals, endless levels. Gambling mechanisms in games, maybe even unlimited gaming purchases. Is it really necessary to have these in game? Maybe not. I'll leave it open for now. But know that if the game industry does nothing, chances are that the government is going to come in and they're going to say, like, no more games for minors, no more this, no more advertisements for games. It's basically what they've done for the nicotine industry, for alcohol, for gambling. At some point the government comes in and they say, like, this is getting totally out of hand. We have to limit this. So if the game industry doesn't do things themselves, chances are the government will. So what are a few other things the game industry can do? Is, for example, help gamers control gaming time and how much they spend, like money-wise, on it. And here are just a few examples. Like notifications. You've been playing for a while, consider taking a break maybe. One thing, like in World of Warcraft, is bring your friends to Azeroth, but don't forget to go to the site of it. as well. So like kind of like little reminders. It might not be making the biggest difference, but all these kinds of things, they really help. And the ability to set limits, both on spending, on time. Of course, chances are not everyone is going to be using this, but it helps to at least have these kinds of options available. I think every game should have these options in the future as well. And then the last thing is to reward life balancing behavior. And one nice example is from a game I sometimes play called Hearthstone. And for example, they have this like a hero that you can unlock when you go to a local, they call it a fireside brawl. So basically, when you go to like a cafe or well, of course, before Corona, now it's a bit more difficult. But when you go to like a local cafe, they sometimes hold these events called fireside brawls. And then when you go there with other people and you play Hearthstone together, then you can unlock this hero. So I think this is really something big that game developers in the future can think about. Like, how can we reward people for going outside, for meeting people, for getting together, for helping others maybe as well? How can we try and implement that in our games to help them find balance? Of course, the big challenge is going to be for these companies to be working together, because let's say one company says, okay, we're going to do all this, like limits and notifications and all these things, and then maybe all the gamers are just going to go to another platform where they don't have this, and the addicted gamers at least. So I think it's important for the platforms to work together, and I think the future is going to be much more about ethical game design. Maybe it's going to be a class in the future in DAE, who knows, I don't know, in Howest. So that was pretty much all I had to say. Thank you. Oh, and we're going to have a few minutes of break, and then we're going to be going to the panel.